Let me welcome all the scholars from various regions of India, the University of Hong Kong, actually. I will also welcome the scholars from other countries, Myanmar, Thailand, Vietnam, Singapore, USA, France, and all these countries, and all the presenters and participants from.
To learn from the many esteemed scholars gathered here.
And the chair Bhante in this session, and ladies and gentlemen, all of you. Okay, let me start my topic. Historical linguistic approach to Buddhaghosa's interpretation. Why we should have that type of approach to the Buddhaghosa's interpretation? I want to suggest these things, first of all, because I want to clarify what is the purpose of my approach, what is the purpose of my explanations. The first thing is that I understand living language is like a living being as it undergoes many changes in the course of time. Even though we know that Pali is a classical language today, it was a living language some times ago. So then, we cannot suppose that Pali was a static language. It was a changing language through the history of the time. So then, we need to understand that Pali may have several differences in the meaning of words, in the patterns of sentences, I mean syntax and semantics also. And the second thing is that the Buddha lived in the 5th century BCE, whereas Buddhaghosa Thera came into being in the 5th century CE. Approximate time pause between these master and commentator is 1,000 years. So then, how we can think that the Buddhaghosa Thera used the same language as the Buddha has used? Because Buddha used that language 1,000 years ago before the Buddhaghosa Thera. So then, there may have, I don't say that there must have, I say there may have some differences in the meaning of words as Buddha has used in his context and Buddhaghosa Thera had to comment in his context. So that is the second point I want to point out. And the third one is that in historical linguistic point of view, we are not supposed to understand the language used at the time of the Buddha. Yes, the same thing I explained. And we are not sure that Pali that employed by Buddhaghosa for writing commentaries is the same language used by the Buddha as well. That's also a controversial matter, and see that there's no agreement or there's no consent between scholars that whether Buddha used the Pali as his own language to communicate. There are some arguments. There are some arguments in favor of that. There are some arguments to refuse that point also. And say that some people directly say that it is not the Magadha, it should be Kaushali, because Buddha lived in Kosala, not in the Magadha. And such type of arguments are going on always there. So then, even in Sri Lanka, the Venerable Buddhadatta Thera argues that Pali is not the language of the Buddha, it is the language of the Arahat Mahinda Thera. He delivered the language, he delivered the Buddhism in Sri Lanka by his language, not by the language of the Buddha. And we are continuing that language. That was the argument of the Buddhadatta Thera in Sri Lanka. So there are so many arguments regarding the language of the Buddha also. In that way also, we cannot directly say that Buddhaghosa Thera had the same language as Buddha has used. And Buddhaghosa Thera knew that Buddha's language and Buddha's words and the connotations and the denotations of those words and all of these things. We cannot suppose in such a ground. We have to doubt it, right? So this is the reason and this is the background I suggest that, and based on this ground I think that it is necessary to have a historical approach, historical linguistic approach to the Buddhaghosa's interpretations. And is it possible? That is the most difficult question then. Is it possible to have a comparison between these two languages, since we are not sure about the Buddha's own language, and how we can make a comparative study? A linguistic comparison is practically possible between modern languages and ancient languages. Yes, it's true. So suppose that nowadays in Sri Lanka, say for instance, we use the word aradita in the sense of inviting. But in early Pali texts, we find the same word aradita making pleasure or please. So completely different meaning is there. But the word is still remaining as it is, aradita. But the meaning is completely changed. If we are going to use the aradita in modern meaning, it will be very hard to understand if somebody knows only ancient Pali text, because he has the view and he has the idea that aradita is so and so, but the person used the aradita in a different sense, because he is practical or he is familiar with the modern term, modern usage. So such a thing is going on in modern languages and the ancient languages. We can easily compare these things. But comparison between two historical periods are practically difficult, maybe impossible, particularly in case with Pali. Because even though, say for instance, Professor Wilhelm Geiger has categorized that there are three states of the Pali language, Gatha Pali, Tripitaka Pali, and the Atua Pali. So even though he has categorized these three states of the Pali, there's no hard and fast line to separate that this is the ancient form of the Pali and this is the middle form, this is the later form. There are some mixture of these words in each period. So then sometimes it is some person may argue that it is impossible to have such type of comparison between the ancient Pali and the Pali of the Buddhaghosa era. Such argument may be there, and we cannot ascertain that. We examine the same language flow. That's also very important, because we cannot ascertain that this is the same language flow. Flow means in the sense that this is the same evolution of the Pali language, because Pali, if we suppose that Pali was a living language and a practical language in a certain time of India, in a certain time in India. So it underwent a certain flow in the Indian subcontinent, but we cannot suppose that the same flow is underwent in the Sri Lanka also. Is undergone in Sri Lanka also, because in Sri Lanka we mix so many things from the Sri Lankan culture, Sri Lankan belief systems, and then thereafter we modify the Pali language according to Sri Lankan varieties, Sri Lankan local varieties, I mean the dialects. So then we cannot think that the Pali has a same evolution in India and in Sri Lanka also. Then there's such an argument that the flow is changed, flow is, or otherwise we can say flow is broken from India to Sri Lanka. And it is hard to find certain historical and cultural facts related to these particular periods. And it's also a very difficult thing that since we are not sure about the historical facts regarding Buddha's periods, since we don't know exactly who is the historical Buddha, whoever we are going to find out the Buddha, it's a literary Buddha. Because we don't know who is the Buddha, we just try to find out the Buddha through the text only. So then whatever text explains, that is the Buddha we imagine. So then we cannot think that it is the true and factual cultural situation happened at that time. Say for instance, Augustine Panikar in his Jain philosophy, he argues that at the time of the Buddha, the suffering is not a social problem. He says that the suffering is an ontological problem. So Buddha wanted to find out the answer for that ontological question, not for the social problem. That was the argument of Augustine Panikar, because he thinks that the Bihar state is not in such a poor state at the time of the Buddha's period, because at that time it was a very rich and very nourished and very developed state. So then whatever Buddha has seen as suffering, it should be an ontological concept, not a social problem. That was the argument posed by the Augustine Panikar. In that case also, we are so uncertain that what are the true cultural facts that influenced on these languages. In this case also, we are not sure that whether this comparison is possible or not. And the final one is typical philosophical adaptations and reinterpretations in given traditions may make the situations worse. That is also true, because in Sri Lanka we believe the Theravada tradition, because the Theravada Buddhism was the introduced one by Arahat Mahinda Thera, and in Theravada Buddhism we understand the world and everything in a semi-realistic way. I don't say it is realistic way because Dr. Y. Karunadasa has clearly explained that it is not the realistic, it is phenomenalistic also. So then I call it is semi-realistic. But if we take the Sarvastivadi positions regarding Buddhism, it is completely realistic. And if we are going into the Vijnanavada positions, it is idealistic, and sometimes it is ontological, or sometimes that linguistic in the Shunyata traditions. And there are so many traditions, so many philosophical interpretations are there regarding Buddhism. So then, if we are going to understand the Buddhist texts in various cultures, in various systems, we find it not as a mere or raw facts. It is mixed, or it is tinged with their philosophical interpretations also. So then, it's also important fact that, and it makes this comparison impossible sometimes. But I have a positive aspect, positive approach, and then I think that then how I should do this. So then I think that Indo-Aryan language family is the best approach we can have in the historical linguistic comparison. Since there is a tested group of family of languages as Indo-Aryan language family, we can examine in the flow of their evolution. So that's what I suggest here. Even though we are not sure that whether the Pali or whatever the language Buddha used is the same language as the Pali or the language of the Buddhaghosa, we can surely identify that all of these masters and commentators use some sort of Indo-Aryan language. So then, Indo-Aryan languages may share so many common features. Regarding those common features, we can understand, not 100% surely, but we can understand at least in a reliable ground that there is a difference of the words, in semantics, and difference or change of the syntax, etc. So this is my approach regarding this problem. And first of all, let me explain how Buddha used the way of interpretation. I take one example from Aganya Sutra. Historically, linguistically, the Sanskrit Kshatriya comes to Pali as Khattiya. It's very obvious. In Aganya Sutta, Buddha explains the word Khattiya. Kethanang adipati ko vasetta Khattiyo. Vasetta. Someone is said to be Khattiya for being lord of the paddy fields. That is the interpretations given by the Buddha. But what about the So if we regard the etymological meaning, it says that according to Rig Veda, she means to possess power, to dwell, and according to Taittiriya Brahmana, the root she has the meaning to inhabit. Tra is the prefix that indicates the protecting. Therefore, the Kshatriya means the protecting or protector of inhabitants. Both Rig Veda and Atharva Veda have the meaning of governing for the meaning for the word of Kshatriya. But Buddha has changed the meaning deliberately because he is the original philosopher and he has a right to change the interpretations to fit his own philosophy. That's why we call it Buddhism, right? So then Buddha did not care about these historical evolutions. He just wanted to reinterpret those words to fit his own ideology. But we cannot expect the same thing from the commentator also. If we think that commentator has the same right to interpret the words according to his own philosophy, it is not the Buddhism, it is the commentator's philosophy. So then, I don't think so that the commentator has the right to follow this example of the Buddha. But what happened the Buddhaghosa's way? I'll take the word Guha Sayang from Dhammapada Chittavagga. Commentary says that Guha Nama Chatumaha Bhuta Guha Idancha Hade Rupang Nisaya Pavattati Guhayang Nama Jatam. Guha means the den made out of 4 elements. Here term is coined Guha Sayang because mind comes to be in association with heart. So then the Buddhaghosa Thera interprets Guha as in the meaning of heart, but it is in the figurative sense or in a metaphorical sense, not in the literary sense. But he has interpreted it like that. What happened? In Rig Veda, Guha clearly says that Guha means the hiding place or secret place. But in Shvetashvatara Upanishad and Mahabharata and in the Brahma Purana, Guha means heart. It's also figurative. Now here it's very clear that the Buddhaghosa Thera has followed the latter meaning, not the earlier meaning. But if we think the time gap, the Buddha should belong to the earlier period, and at the time of the Buddha, it is possible to understand that Guha in the sense of hiding place or the secret place. In that sense, if we are going to understand the Guha Sayang, Buddha does not say that mind resides in the heart. He wants to say that mind resides in a secret place of a body. That is the Buddha's interpretation. How we can say that mind resides in the heart? It is not scientific and anyway, but it is the interpretations of the Buddhaghosa Thera, and he has taken that interpretations from the latter texts in Shvetashvatara and Mahabharata and Brahma Purana, etc.
Can you please
summarize? Yeah, of course. But there are some counter examples also. I'm really sorry that I cannot explain it, but very briefly I explain that Vedantagu, the word Vedantagu, even Max Muller say that the Vedanta, Max Muller and the Radhakrishnan also says that Vedanta means Upanishads. But in the commentary, Buddhaghosa has clearly explained that Veda means knowledge, and that is the original meaning of the Veda also. It has been used in the Rig Veda also. So then sometimes the Buddhaghosa has referred to the historical meaning. But once again, if you refer that Takka Pariyahata in the Brahmajala Sutta, he has used the word Tena Pariyayena. This means arguing in a different ways. But if we refer linguistically, what is the meaning of Pariyahata? Pariyahata, we find that Shatapada Brahmana, Pariyahata means the turn upside down. So then what the Buddha refuses is that it is not the logic or it is not the argument. He refused that to use the logic in a deliberately misguided way. So that is what the Buddha refused. But in the commentary, it says that the Buddha refused the logic or argue in a different way. So I hurriedly go to the conclusions. My conclusion is very in some passages, Buddhaghosa Thera commented upon words regarding historical meanings of words, but not always. And in understanding Buddha's words, sometimes it is better to consider historical meanings of words, as it gives quite a new, more reliable understanding of the Buddha's words. Thank you very much.